And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
I don't care!
What's next?
What's next?
What's next?
Don't you want to hear what's next?
What are you going to do next?
What's next for you?
What's next?
What's next?
Okay, so what's next?
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of After the Gold. And this week, we're going to be talking about the 2020 Disney Plus movie, Timmy Failure, Mistakes Were Made. A fascinating movie to see a Best Picture winner go from the peak of everything, a big theatrical movie, to 5 years later doing a straight-to-streaming movie. I think a really fascinating production history. The reason why I want to talk about this movie in particular, and really excited to talk about kind of this very unique kind of a film and post Best Picture career follow-up. But if you're new to the series, that's what I do every single week. I talk about movies that were made directly after a director winning for Best Picture, why they decided to make those movies, what does that tell us about their interests. Did they also write the next follow-up movie? Did they try to make another Oscar bait movie? Did they try to have some really big, bold, crazy blank check that they've always been wanting to make? The first half of the video is talking about that, the production history, how they got it made, the increases in budget oftentimes, and then the second half of the video talking about my thoughts on the film, why I think it's interesting. And there really is no through line in terms of what movie I choose versus not, except for the fact that I think all movies covered on this series are interesting. Almost all of them have both interesting production histories, and the movie itself is interesting and I want to talk about it. Or sometimes in other episodes like this one, it's maybe a little bit more so the production history, the follow-up, the why this movie got made, trying to understand that, trying to put the director's career kind of in context that I find so fascinating, just as much as the film itself. So a bit of a kind of cultural career retrospective as it is a film discussion on the movie itself, a little bit of a combination of both there. So I hope you guys appreciate that. And if you do have any thoughts on this film or the craziness of this case of the kind of a wild swing that Tom McCarthy makes, please feel free to comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. But without further ado, let's jump into things, starting off with the production history of Timmy Failure, Mistakes Were Made. But before we go forwards, we have to go backwards. Let's talk about the movie that Tom McCarthy made right before this, which was 2015's Spotlight. 2015, a really exciting year for the Oscars. I think in many ways was the genesis of me wanting to start my YouTube channel. I thought it was such a fascinating Oscars year that when 2016 came around, I was like, I gotta make movies at the time to keep up with everything and to kind of talk about all my thoughts and feelings. And that's where we now have upcoming, I think the upcoming season will be the 10th season of Old's Oscar Countdown. So crazy to see that happening. But what is fascinating about 2015 was because there was a kind of a three-way race going into Oscars night. It was either The Revenant, Big Short, or Spotlight, and Spotlight ends up winning, being the little movie that could, did pretty well at the box office, only got a couple Oscars, screenplay, picture. Tom McCarthy doesn't win for director. It was, I think, in many ways, the representation of the preferential ballot in the modern day era, where a movie like Spotlight would win under the system because it's the one movie that everyone likes, but maybe not everyone loves. So when we have these kind of more split races, more divisive movies, maybe like The Revenant, don't win, but something like The Spotlight, which everyone does like, does end up winning. Interesting kind of a movie, but it's interesting in the sense of Tom McCarthy isn't this big auteur, this young filmmaker who makes an exciting movie that sweeps the Oscars. He's a journeyman who has made some good Sundance movies and then, a couple of bad, maybe comedies that don't really work. And then kind of comes out of nowhere with Spotlight in the first place, with just a really solid script based on this true story that I don't think even was, it wasn't really planned to win Best Picture. When the movie premiered at Venice, it premiered out of competition. People didn't think of this as a big Oscar prestige type of a movie, and then it was really good and just got well appreciated, and then it just built and built and built and built until it won Best Picture. But because of that, I don't think people think of it as like a Everything Everywhere All at Once style hit that sweeps everything and dominates the Oscars and does super well at the box office. It was like everyone kind of likes it. It was a solid movie, but I don't think the studios are ready to give Tom McCarthy the keys to the studio and write him a blank check of $100 million and, oh, he's this genius voice, make whatever he wants. he was this kind of a journeyman filmmaker. He was writing his movies, so he had that aspect of it. But what I think is so fascinating is that, well, Timmy Failure is the movie we're going to be covering today, and it is his technically next feature film after making Spotlight. His follow-up to Spotlight is actually three things. Three things that also perfectly represent the modern day, or at least the kind of late 2010s, early 2020s style of Hollywood consumption and content creation. So let me explain that. The three things that he does as his follow-up are Timmy Failure, which we're talking about today, a straight-to-Disney Plus movie released at the beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic, so it was always kind of planned to be a straight-to-Disney Plus movie. This was going to peak at when all of these studios were trying to build up their own streamers, fearing Netflix kind of taking over the way it already has, kind of the modern-day household, and wanting to maybe create something on their own. And stock prices were really rising because of this investment, because investors really saw this as the future, so they wanted the studios to kind of create their own service, which led to every other studio kind of creating their streaming service, which I think we're now seeing a pullback on. But this was kind of peak where it's like, hey, we're going to get the best picture director and writer of Spotlight and his next movie. It's not coming to theaters, it's coming straight to our platform. If you want to watch it, you have to come to Disney Plus. Fascinating, kind of an interesting point of where we were in the early 2010s, where now we're maybe going towards theaters a little bit more, and a lot of the studios are avoiding that. But that was kind of a period of time, a huge flux, where a lot of these straight-to-streaming movies were made and bought for streaming. So that's kind of interesting one aspect of modern-day Hollywood content making. That was an example. But actually, some of Tom McCarthy's truer follow-ups would be, he directed the first couple episodes of 13 Reasons Why, a teen Netflix show that was a huge success. And that was only a couple of years after Spotlight. So in a way, it was another streaming success, except on the TV side of things. And it was for Netflix. And it was a huge early part and early success within Netflix's career that I think maybe got some of the teenagers to really engage with the content that's going on there, and did become a bit of a phenomenon for its time. And Tom McCarthy, in the same way Fincher was instrumental in the early episodes of House of Cards, Tom McCarthy was instrumental in those first little beginnings of 13 Reasons Why. And then the third thing that he does is maybe more of his true follow-up, which is a limited miniseries for Showtime about Roger Ailes, the loudest voice in the room, which, if, Tom McCarthy won for Spotlight and was released in 2006, and that was the movie that won Best Picture instead of The Departed, let's say. That follow-up, the Roger Ailes miniseries, probably would have been made as a $60 million movie and still starred, Russell Crowe or some of these big actors, and would have been a big, splashy kind of a fall movie, biopic with this huge budget. And that's what the movie ended up being. But in the modern day era, when you want to tell adult-driven dramas and stories with big budgets, you tell them on TV. You tell them over 6 hours in a miniseries rather than 2 hours or 2.5 hours in a film. So I really do think when I think of Tom McCarthy and Spotlight, his next follow-up wasn't just one thing. It was starting a teen Netflix show, which is one kind of a path of a writer-director. It's doing this kind of mini-series that for Showtime, in the same way you see like a big HBO mini-series or something like that, that is adult-driven and political and can't be a movie anymore because it's not going to make any money at the box office, but maybe we can make it as a mini-series. And then the other thing is to do a wild shift, do a family movie, but still a movie that goes straight to streaming because they're not confident that you can get, eventually, people have butts in seats. Even though you just won Best Picture and wrote the movie and made some money at the box office, the modern day kind of reputation of a director like Tom McCarthy in the late 2010s and early 2020s is streaming TV show, streaming movie, or streaming miniseries. Those were kind of his options. He ends up doing all three, all the interesting kind of different successes, but we'll talk about in this episode more particularly Timmy Failure. So speaking of Timmy in particular, we don't have to do as much in terms of the box office side of things because there wasn't too much on that regard. The movie was financed and made without any kind of a huge press. Premieres at Sundance. A couple of weeks later, it's on the Disney Plus platform, which was a unique thing at the time. Kind of use Sundance as a kind of a launch and a launching pad for the film. the movie comes out. Hard to say if it was a success or not because we don't know those numbers. It didn't do well at the box office, so we don't have that kind of public information. But what's so fascinating in the kind of grand scheme of things is that this was a straight to Disney Plus movie that is no longer on Disney Plus because they figured out that sometimes having historic libraries on a streaming service isn't the most profitable way of going about things, and that you can actually sell some of this content to other platforms like Netflix or put it on, available to rent for other people. So actually, Timmy Failure, at least at the time of recording, a straight to Disney Plus movie is no longer on Disney Plus, which I think is just fascinating, but also terrible for its reputation. And people don't know where to find it. It's difficult to find, even though it was a streaming type of a movie. And once again, kind of illustrative of the modern day viewing approach and why so many people are interested in things like physical media, because when you have something that's electronic, you don't own it. And because you don't own it, it can be taken off at any time and sold for parts or for tax incentives or shipped off to other streaming services. And it's impossible to find. And it's unfortunate when you have great filmmakers like Tom McCarthy kind of have to be subject to this, and things make it a little bit more difficult to see some of these films. That being said, I would say if it was a successful movie, it probably would have gotten a sequel or another series, and it probably wouldn't have got taken off the Disney Plus site. So probably overall, in terms of its modern day reputation, it's low, and in part because it's difficult to find. But even still, when it was released on Disney Plus, probably not that successful in general. But now transitioning more so into my thoughts on the film, we can keep it relatively brief, more so because I want to talk about the fascinating production history in Tom McCarthy's career. That's the reason why I wanted to do this episode. But the movie itself, I did watch and did enjoy. It's a kids movie. I don't have kids. I'm not a kid, so I can't kind of understand it from that approach. I can kind of understand it from, this is maybe another kid's Diary of a Wimpy Kid type of a movie. That was the big series when I was growing up. So I do see some parallels between that series and this, which is based off a book, which they, of course, adapt into this case as a movie with a young, kind of quirky protagonist. So in a way, that's a positive sign that this did remind me of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which was of my generation, which I really appreciated. So I'm sure there's lots of other kids who are a little bit younger than me who grew up with this and connected with the movie, obviously, though I can't say directly. It's definitely not a Pixar type movie where it works for both adults and children. I do think when I'm looking at the movie, I'm kind of trying to look at through a kid's eyes of like, would a kid like this? Does this make sense for this kind of an audience group? I ultimately do think it is. It is more visually inventive than maybe it needs to be with some of its kind of imaginary type sequences with the polar bear, and just some of the visual panache and comedy of some of the camera work sequences. There are some kind of jokes that are camera movement jokes, sometimes more than they actually are dialogue jokes on a piece of paper. Did think there was some emotional, heartwarming stuff too, particularly with Craig Robinson's character. I think he is sneakily very good in the film. And I do think that it's maybe a divisive movie in that the main kid is strange and odd, but that was actually kind of the thing I liked about it. I liked how the movie was kind of quirky and weird, and how so many of these main characters in so many Hollywood blockbusters are just boring and bland, and they're purposefully bland because therefore anyone can kind of project themselves onto them. There's a reason why something like Harry Potter works so well. He's not that interesting of a character, but he's kind of just quiet and bland, and a lot of people can project themselves onto him, and that's why I think it's so universal in many ways. But you have all these great colorful characters outside of Harry, but Harry Potter himself is kind of boring. But what's interesting about Timmy Failure is that Timmy Failure himself is not boring. Now, he can be divisive, you may find him annoying, and that may kind of ruin your experience, but he's a true kid that makes mistakes and is incredibly frustrating at times. But you understand it because you're trying to be empathetic and understand his perspective. And he also is, clearly got some quirks to him and some different oddities that you want to kind of understand. He doesn't fit in with the other people. And that's very clearly communicated and quirky, and I think adds to the uniqueness of the movie, which is not just a bland kids movie. It is a movie with a point of view. It is a movie that is kind of quirky and weird with some of those more sentimental moments, with some genuine humor, with in particular some of the camera work and some of the stuff that McCarthy is bringing. So I can't say, this is an amazing movie that works for everyone. It's definitely a kids movie. It's aimed for kids, and I'm not a kid, and I didn't watch it when I was a kid, so it's hard for me to totally understand whether or not it works or not. But seeing it, in my adulthood, I did appreciate some of the filmmaking style. And I did appreciate just how much of a voice the movie did end up having, which I appreciated. But who knows if it was deserving to be made after the gold. I think in many ways I'd love to see Tom McCarthy make more movies like Stillwater. I think that was a really fascinating, interesting movie that was, in many ways, that's probably his true spotlight, kind of a best picture follow-up movie. A fascinating movie with Matt Damon. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check that one out. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Once again, please feel free to comment if you've seen the movie, or if you want to talk about the fascinating kind of career and hypothesis that I've put forward with Tom McCarthy and the 3 kind of representations of his career. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.